You're tuned in to RX Radio.
Friends, welcome back. Another episode of RX Radio. Myself, Jordan Jiunta, here with my good friend, Jorge de Hoyos, El Papi the Trace.
I should have never told you this.
No, you should not have. I regret being myself. So I, in turn, regret you being here for you about me being here. But thanks for being here. If you guys are familiar with Prescript, you are familiar with Jorge. He teaches the level 1 for us. He's been out at the level 3 a few times now. He's getting pretty skinny over there. He's been on a cut for a while, but we'll see. We'll see if he puts on some mass. But Jorge,
I'm starting to get suspicious about your intents here because for a while it took so long for us to podcast together in between one episode and the next. And we podcasted recently, and you just learned that I was sick for like a week, and you immediately booked another podcast with me. So I see the ulterior motive here.
I'm really just trying to make myself look better and feel better about myself. So, but hey, I do need you to know today, what is it? It's Thursday, September 5th, 2024. This is the second day in my entire life that I woke up above 200 pounds.
Dude, let me just say, I know we have the rivalry and the continues going back and forth to each other, but I remember when this started and we were talking about like just you being able to like consistently stay above 180 and how that was a struggle. And now that we've reached this benchmark, I never thought we were going to get here, but I'm kind of happy that we are.
Oh man, I love you. Thanks, man. I couldn't have done it without you. I couldn't have done it without you constantly bullying me in the gym and just being so large.
Yeah, dude, my job is just to increase the self-hate for yourself.
Yeah, no, I hate myself a lot, but it definitely increases when I'm around you. I hate myself way more, especially on arm day. Before we get too far down the self-hate rabbit hole, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I just wanted to let you know that right now through Prescript, we have the Prescript Level 1 live and for sale. Class starts the 30th of September, I believe, whatever that Monday is. We'll have 4 lectures throughout the week, all the same material provided by different providers. We have a lab section, I believe, every day of the week right now. You will get access to the Prescript Collective, which enables you to the Discord server where you can have 24/7 access to all of our coaches and collective members worldwide, along with some technique labs for yourself and your clients. Come on in and get technique assessments from none other than the Eric Bagheera and whoever our celebrity host is that week. And get to network with all the other level 1 coaches that are currently going through. This is set to be our biggest class yet. So pretty pumped about this. If you guys are interested, head on over to the website, www.pre-script.com. All the information's on the homepage. Click through. You guys can sign up right there. If you have any questions, just shout out to myself, Jorge, Joe, any of the guys, and we'll be happy to help you with it. If you want to hop on a call with Jorge, and he'll talk you through it. But if you guys are interested, now's the time. Level 2 also taking off late September as well. So if you guys are level 1 coaches and you're interested in taking the level 2, it is starting end of September. So keep your eyes open for that. The coaches that take the level 2 in September will be eligible for level 3 in Tampa in January 2025. That'll be an NFL Combine class. So we'll be training college athletes, college football players, getting ready for the NFL Combine. So if you guys are interested, head on over to the website, do your thing over there. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. But most importantly, Jorge, thanks for being here. How you been, man? What's new with you?
I was sick for a while. I was wasting away. But now we're good. Training's good. Food's finally back to a decent amount. Other than that, it's been great lately just having the opportunity to hop on a call with a bunch of people who are either in the L1 cohort or that are about to get on the cohort. And it's just been I mean, I remember I took the course way back, any like lab started or any of that. So just to see the amount of people that have joined and like all the different perspectives and different minds going together, it's been really really fun. So I think that the opportunity, and I mean, we have the podcast and all this other resources to be able to dive deeper into topics, but I would not just gloss over the opportunity to like hop on labs and just being able to like interact live with other coaches or like with whoever's running the lab. I know that was for sure one of the most valuable tools for me when I was trying to like step it up. So
Yeah.
shameless plug again, but I really encourage it.
Awesome. Yeah, labs are awesome. Every week get to hop on, get to talk with a group full of like-minded people, kind of work through some issues, ask any questions you have around training. I've been doing them since the beginning pretty
Yeah.
much. And I, in leading the labs, have learned more from them than I have most other things in my professional career. Like outside of being on the gym floor and working with clients, that's been one of the best learning environments for me. So that's something that I definitely recommend you guys take advantage of if you're in the current level one, if you're going to be in the next one. Those are a huge asset to the course, and it's going to make up for a lot of learning that you can't really fit into the context of a lecture or a textbook. It's a lot of the intangibles, a lot more kind of the subjective stuff. So, and you can make it as specific to you, yourself, and your clients as possible. So
Yeah.
that's definitely a huge benefit to it.
Yeah. And I had a conversation with one of the coaches in the L1 currently this week, and it kind of ties into like kind of what we're going to talk about after. But she was saying that she felt that she still needed to like work on her language and all like a lot of these like secondary elements, but she felt that she could start to like fit the puzzle pieces where they needed to be. And I think like in reality, that's all we're trying to do with the course. Like you can learn the words whenever you want to learn the words. You can not learn the words ever. But if you can kind of like start to see where the puzzle can move and like how you can fit these pieces in. And I know that was, I mean, lectures help, but like I know that the labs really did that for me to be able to understand like different thought processes and like how people look at like approaching these different like situations or progression runways or whatever it may be. So just being able to, if not under like know the details, but like if you have the general idea of can you see the concept and just see where it plays or where it doesn't make sense, like, that's probably the most valuable part.
Yeah, it's really good feedback. And actually, I think one of my favorite pieces of feedback that I got about the course came from none other than Eric Bagheera himself. When he described to me, he said it just connected a lot of dots. Like there's a lot of ideas you have about training or things that realizations that you've come to along the way in your career. And it's not necessarily like it's these revolutionary ideas that don't exist or haven't been out there, but it organizes them really well. And it helps you draw the right correlations so that you can make decisions faster, you can make progressions better, and you could manage clients for a longer period of time realistically. Like I was talking with some people about this the other day on one of the labs. They were asking the difference between like rehab and strength training and like where what do I specialize, like where do I fit in along the way. And to me it's all just one continuous progression, right? It's you find someone on wherever they're at on that timeline, whether they're more on the regress side, closer to rehab type stuff, or the progress side, more like peak performance or peak strength athletes. It's everyone's on that spectrum somewhere, and the progressions hold true no matter where you are. The regressions hold true. It all comes back to the principles of training, right? Is we need to understand how to create positions, how to stabilize before we can start to exert force. And it's once you start to understand those underlying principles that govern progression and regression, then it doesn't matter where someone is. You can take them to where they need to be, whether that's pulling back to regress or whether that's pushing forward, putting your foot on the gas to progress them to get higher levels of performance. So that's one of the things that I really like about it. I guess we'll segue this. Always the worst at segues here at RX Radio. But you were sick. You were down to like what, 165 pounds or something.
Relax. I'm
You're
down to
looking pretty rough.
my
Pretty.
lowest is a weight that you'll never touch. So,
Oh, challenge me, challenge me,
yeah.
Jorge. Do it right here with all of our listeners as a witness.
Oh, dude. I don't know if I can
So,
guide you towards self destruction that much.
all right. So previously you were sick, though. You were coming out of a cut,
Yeah.
and then you got sick, and that was what, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago.
So this last week was the first full week of training that I had.
Okay.
So that's kind of where it fits in the timeline.
Okay. So I guess a good segue into what we're going to talk about today. We'll talk about kind of what your training day and training split should look like depending on what your goals are. So coming out of that, what are your goals right now? And then how has diet changed? What does training look like coming out of that phase?
Yeah. So obviously, initially, like coming out of a pretty aggressive deficit for a while, that obviously, like when we're talking about recoverability and like being sick, and obviously, like your resources are going elsewhere that's not building muscle or losing fat. Just bumping up those calories allows you to recover better, which in that point, that's all I really wanted. Like I just wanted to be able to get out of bed, right? But once that was gone, I guess that I have the fortune of having a coach that can like think about this for me, and I don't have to like really be concerned about my own training at the moment. But the whole idea was, can we bump up the volume slightly from what I was doing at a deficit, and then volume was still like relatively low compared to what I'm used to. But the idea was just kind of like self-regulate intensity. Some stuff was done with like tempos. Some stuff was done like I had to be smart and not be an idiot and just want to kill myself every day for that week, coming off, not being able to move. But I think that a lot of times training can, like the program itself can look very, very similar, but the regulation comes in your ability to push during that week, right? Like the exercises and the prescription can look the same, but if you have lesser or more calories, you'll have a greater or lower ability to push performance. So when we're talking about like, hey, are we like progressing in volume? Are we progressing in this? Like you may be progressing in stimulus overall just by a means of you're able to do more, not even because you're changing the program itself. So in that case, I think that's the main progression for me right now. Like the program after the deficit is not changing in like a week to week manner, but my ability to perform within the program is increasing as the week went on. And then as this is the second week that I can go into the same program and clearly see this boost in performance from the previous week. So the program itself kind of stays the same, but my ability to perform within the program is a lot larger. And when we talk about like introducing new training blocks, some of the movements that are in this new training block were removed for a couple of weeks or a couple of months. So just like by design, this going into this new phase and having to like get adjusted to these movements once again and like kind of like not reacquire the skill because I don't have to learn it all over again, but kind of like make those connections again where I can be very efficient at the movement allows for a regulation in load and intensity as I go from week to week where I get comfortable with the movement again. And it just kind of fits perfectly with I feel better. I can push better just because I'm not sick anymore. Food is being added so I can push harder. And this kind of goes hand in hand with like I'm getting better at the skill again. And this all kind of like leads to this buildup of the program in the paper is not changing, but like all these different variables are allowing me to kind of like ramp up as the weeks go on during the same microcycle.
Yeah, I think that's a really strong message that you're sending with that is that the program doesn't really have to change very often, right? It depends on the goals, of course, but I'm assuming your goal is to get as big as you can, right?
As
Like
big as
as
I can
pure
and as strong as I can.
as big and strong as you can. All
Yeah.
right. And my goal, not very different, is to get bigger and stronger than you.
Correct.
That's it. So when you're talking about, we'll say a hypertrophy based strength program.
Yeah.
The program itself can largely stay the same through multiple phases of training or multiple intentions during that training cycle. The message that you're sending that I really like with this is that regardless of the program, it's everything that's going on outside of the gym that's going to influence the self-regulation within the gym, right? Like if you're sick, we'll consider that an external stressor. Like I put that in
Yeah.
the same bin as like work stress, relationship stress. Like
Yeah.
it's all kind of the same. It's just this external stressor outside of what you're doing in the gym that is taking up your bandwidth to recover outside of the gym. So it's going to force you to downregulate what you can do in the gym. So that's a big one. The other one that you mentioned was just calorie intake. You can do the same program, and this is literally what I've been doing for the past year now. Is I've kind of been doing the same exact thing. I've been running the same split, doing generally the same movements. I've just been using different techniques to either pull back and manage load or push forward and increase loading on at specific times in specific movements. And with that comes exercise order. Sometimes I'll flip exercise order to allow for greater intensity in certain areas and to regulate intensity in other areas. So I think that's a really, really good point that you're making, is that really the things that are changing, it's not training. Training can largely stay the same for most people for hypertrophy based strength training, which I think is a very general term for what most people that go to the gym are striving for. They want to build muscle, they want to be stronger, they want to look better. And that's going to be, once we take care of the training, the most important variables are the things outside of that. It's going to be your diet. What does your diet look like? And what does your recoverability look like in terms of sleep, stress management, like health, I guess we can use as a general term as well. Like for some people, that's going to be like literally being sick or not, or that's going to be like literal health markers. Like what's your blood pressure? What's your cholesterol? Like what are your inflammatory markers look like? So different things like that are really going to be what drives progress in one direction or the other.
Yeah, I agree. And when we look at these markers, and this is a conversation that we've had that has made a huge impact in your training, but like being able to take this external variable seriously, just because as people that love the gym, it's so easy to just go hard at the gym, right?
Yeah.
But understand that what happens outside is really going to dictate not what happens inside, although that to a certain degree, but like the benefits that we can reap from what we're doing at the gym, right? So I think that plays a major role. And the other part that I think is very important is the ability to strategically, like when changes are happening in the program, know that these changes will call for a regulation and load just because of this transition period of like reintroduction of a new skill or progression of a skill or regression of a skill. And knowing that this by default, the first week for sure, there will be like a ceiling that will be imposed upon whoever's performing the program because it's a completely new thing that you were doing last week. So there's there's not any connection of like week to week of carryover. And then know that itself, like just creating that change can create a new ramp up for stimulus going forward. And like what you're saying with your training, if it stays largely the same, but you just make these small switches that can be even like a switch in like, I don't know, how you perform the movement or like a slight variation, this slight variation can create a full different pathway that you can take on for like 3 months where now you kind of like regulate it load and now you can progress that for the next following weeks. So understanding that just like, it's not necessarily about like changing the full microcycle or whatever we want to call it, but like one change can be the thing that will be like the regulatory factor for this next couple of weeks. And that can be the thing that will allow for the room for progression going forward to derive whatever stimulus that we're trying to drive.
Yeah, I love it. And I think to make it a little bit personal, make it very real, I'll talk about some of those changes that I've made in my training recently. One of them is exercise order, and the other is
Yeah.
just kind of utilizing intensifiers to get more out of each set or get more out of, we'll say, a volume progression before an intensity progression. So like one of the things, like I love back squatting. Back squatting is my favorite movement in the gym to do, period. So it's always in my program to some degree, but I can't always squat heavy because I'm broken. So that's the end of
In more
that.
than one way.
Yeah, physically, mentally, emotionally. which that's good for squatting, except for the physical one. But what I've done to kind of modulate squat intensity, kind of broad spectrum over the course of, we'll say, the last 3 months, but also over the course of like the last year or like multiple years, is one of the things that I'll do is I'll modify the order of my squat movement. Right? It's probably about 3 months ago. Squatting heavy was lower priority, and I'm pretty proficient in the squat. So what I would do is I would focus more on my hypertrophy work outside of squatting, and I'd have a squat later in the workout because it was something that I know that I can execute at a relatively high degree, even under fatigue. But I wanted to modulate the load that I was using session to session. So I wanted to allocate more fatigue to hypertrophy work than I did towards strength specific work. So I would have like a moderate squat volume. I'd probably do like 3 sets of 5 at a challenging weight, like RPE 7 or 8. But what I would do before that, I'd walk in the gym and I would start with a B stance RDL and a 45-degree hip extension. From there, I would go to some sort of externally supported like squat type variation. I was on hack squat for a while, and then I would do split squats after that, and then I would squat. So it would
Yeah.
be there's a bit of repetition in that specific variation, but basically the message that I'm trying to convey is that squatting was lower priority, even though it's a highly technical skill, but it would be lower down in the order because it was a lower priority. That was more skill maintenance with the hypertrophy focus. And now, about 3 months later, I've gotten to the point where I've worked up that squat to basically B1 in terms of order. Like A1, A2 is still the things that are going to make me feel good in terms of squatting, which is a B stance RDL, 45-degree hip extension there. That's kind of my standard squat warm up. And then A1, A2, then B1 is going to be back squat. And I'm at the point where I'm like doing a top set of 5, one back off set, and then I move on. And then after that, I've removed any secondary, like externally supported squatting movement at that point because the intensity is so high on my back squat that I don't want to get too repetitive, and I don't necessarily want to accumulate stress in terms of loading. So what I'll do is I'll go with a movement that is less externally supported, like right now I'm doing a bilaterally loaded rear foot elevated split squat. And now with that's a movement that's been in my program for a while, but I'll tell you the progression there is I started with a contralateral load, and I would do that kind of earlier on in the session, and I would progress that for loading for a while. And there's a bit of a tempo, but it was more so like, all right, I'm going to get relatively heavy with these because I want some sort of stimulus of load because I'm diminishing the amount of load that I'm going to get from my actual squat pattern because it's lower down in the exercise order, it's later in the workout. And the progression now is that after I squat, I go right to that bilaterally loaded rear foot elevated split squat. But if you really hate yourself, here's something that you could throw in. You could do it as a rest pause. So
Ooh.
I've been doing them not only tempoed, but tempo with a rest pause.
You're
So I'll
using
get away.
bodybuilder words now.
Yeah, right. I know. And you know what? In 9 weeks, I put 4 inches on my quads.
Oh, jeez.
Legit.
It's, it's, it's good to know that you're finally willing to train hard at the gym.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts so bad. No, because that's the correlation with the self hate. It's like
Yeah.
no one hates me more than I hate me.
Yeah.
uh, but basically, what I'm getting at is that I chased down a loading progression in this more stability based exercise, and it's not very externally supported contralateral load. And now what I'm doing is more of a volume progression, and I'm artificially increasing intensity with tempo and rest pause. And I'm actually in a more stable position because now I have a
Yeah.
bilateral load, so I'm able to accommodate center of mass a bit better, and really focus tension into the muscles that I'm trying to train. So that's kind of like those two worked kind of inversely throughout that the last 3 months of training, is that the priorities kind of switched, and I'm trying to get the most out of the least for both of those movements for as long as I can.
Yeah. I think it's important to just kind of like highlight that you're saying that now you're kind of chasing this more volume progression when it comes to the split squats. And the reason why you can do this is because the volume now with the prior portion of the training is so low, because the intensity and the loading is so high that that's kind of all you can afford on that end. And now you can go into an exercise that maybe you won't be taxed as much like axially or just like systemically, but you can really push the volume progression there. And like you said, like it's a more stable environment just because you're bilateral loading. And even like when progressing the contralateral side of things, like the reason why you could push that so hard is because you have like a decent ability to stabilize in even like with a hard deviation of center of mass. Like someone who doesn't have that ability would not be able to push that and load, and they would have to look for other qualities within the same movement. Or like even the reason why you could afford to have a back squat so late in the session is because you're so proficient in the back squat that it's not like a highly skilled movement for you at this point. Like you can afford to do it when you're kind of tired. Once you've banged out a bunch of like volume to your legs directly in a hack squat, once you've done all these things, you can still maintain a squat pretty decently. And I'm just highlighting this because I don't want people to just say, "Oh, Jay said that you can have your back squat as like your D1 movement." But I mean, it shows that I always think that if you look at someone's program, if you look at like the first two or three movements, you should be able to tell kind of what their main goal is. And if we talk about like these two different progressions, like how they inverted from the last 3 months to the last, I don't know, 6 months or year that you were training, it was very clear what you were specifically looking at in these two different sessions. Like you were clearly not looking to maximize your squat on the previous block.
Right.
You're looking to search different adaptations, maybe like in a more work capacity way, hypertrophy, whatever focus you want to be able to insert there. And squat was just an issue of maintaining skill. And now it's kind of the other way around. And the adding the volume becomes kind of like a secondary aspect. But now that you have the work capacity, you can just push it really hard with other mediums where you don't need to be super externally stabilized, and you can kind of like approach different runways of progression. 4 inches in your quads. I don't know when was the last time you had a 4-inch increment in a specific muscle group in that portion of time, but
Yeah.
that only happens after you can have the clarity to run these progressions. And like what we always talk about, right? Like if you have more tools on your toolbox, there's so many more things that you could do to drive. If you're talking about hypertrophy, so many people think, like, I don't think that when people say best hypertrophy movement for quads, people would think rear foot elevated. They would just go like directly hack squat, leg press, I don't know, hamstring curls. But since the toolbox is so like wide, you can pick so many things and you can still derive this certain types of stimulus that will get you to where you want to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the way I approach it, because for me, it's always strength is always the priority, and
Yeah.
hypertrophy is just a vehicle to get there. Right? It's there just becomes a point where you've maxed out your frame, you've maxed out your potential in terms of the weight that you can lift because of the muscle that you have. So
Yeah.
there so there becomes a point where you just have to have more muscle if you want to move more weight. So in my mind, it's always it's not necessarily a strength based hypertrophy program. It's a hypertrophy based strength program, right? Strength is always going to be the end goal for me. So yeah, it's like sick. I put 4 inches on my legs, on my quads, but At the same time, my goal wasn't necessarily to optimize hypertrophy.
Yeah.
My goal is to optimize pushing through my legs. So I'm going to put myself in a position where I'm able to progress the stimulus of extending my knee, extending my hip, and doing both of those in conjunction with one another. So a lot of that comes down to like, all right, I'm not necessarily doing this grossly underloaded variation of a split squat so that I can bias more quad fibers. And it's like, no, I'm going to kind of go like maybe I'll do my split squat with a little bit of heel elevation. And I'll keep a more upright torso to bias a bit of quads, but I'm not going to do that to the point where I lose loadability of the exercise. Like I'm going to load this bitch up and I'm going to load it up as much as I can and I'm going to make it hurt as much as I can. And then I'm going to rest for 30 seconds and I'm going to do it again until I can't. So I'm still taking training to that point of failure. But at the same time, it's not, I think a lot of people get caught up in okay, I need to bias these muscle fibers and this. Like, if that's your goal, like, cool, go for it. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that if you just load it up and you focus more on, okay, maybe we want a little bit of bias towards one muscle group versus another if we have imbalances or if we have a specific goal in terms of aesthetics that we're looking for. But if you're diminishing loadability to the point where it's just an ineffective exercise, what the fuck does it matter? Like if I have a split squat variation that's very quad biased, but I'm using, I don't know, a 30-pound dumbbell to do it, am I not going to get more stimulus to the quads if I have two 85s in my hands? Like, you tell me.
I thought you were going to say maybe like at least the hundreds, but I'm glad you're up to the
Yeah.
85s.
I can't wait to train a lower session with you next time. Yeah. Don't make me bring up the last time we did split squats together in Tampa.
Split squats? I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
I didn't have any problem with split squats.
All right.
You know, what I heard from what you said earlier is you try to get stronger because you can't get bigger. That's what I'm hearing from this whole I don't know, 5 minutes that you just spoke. But I think in reality, what you're saying, and I like a lot, is that when we're looking at these different approaches to training, people get so caught up on like directionality of fibers or like perfect biasing of, I don't know, whatever is the new trend. And in reality, all we need is, can we just nudge it a little bit in the right direction and then just load it and train very hard and let that be the exponentiating factor that will actually get the results. Because in reality, it's kind of like the same concept that we talked about, like, okay, leg press, and people get so like, oh, I'm going to go all the way up here for glute dominant and quad dominant. It's like, at one point, you're just loading like 50% of what you could be loading. If you just like slightly nudge it to where you need it to go and then allow the load and the work to be the thing that will drive the stimulus, even if it's not as quad bias, the results that you're going to get directly to your quads just by being able to load significantly more weight into that movement is what's really going to allow you to, to drive not just that progression, but any progression. And I think I don't like to be the coach that gets into this topic, but like just the mindset that takes for someone to like, I want to have this ideal lineup and then like kind of like skirt and avoid the training hard part. As opposed to someone who's like, this is why for so long we see people at the gym that are just like training in a way that makes you question everything you know. But they just train so hard that it doesn't matter that much.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. And the more, fuck, man, we've been talking about exercise for a while. I've been talking about it probably most of my life, more of my life than I haven't. And a lot of that, like in the beginning, it starts off more as curiosity and trying different things and understanding what works and what doesn't. And now I think I'm on kind of the other side of that where it's like, fuck it, I've tried it. Like I've done almost everything, and I've found what works best for me. I found what works best for the majority of people that I train, and a lot of it does come down to just fucking training hard. Like you're going to get progress doing less ideal things if you just try hard. Like I've simplified my thinking so much to just how can I put someone in a position where they can just try as hard as they can until trying hard meets failure. And that's like, if we're talking hypertrophy, that that can be most of the conversation. If we're
Yeah.
talking like skill specific strength, there needs to be a little bit more to it. But if we're talking like to the truest extent, like isolation training, like if all I had was a hamstring curl and a quad extension and a leg press, like you can get some pretty big, pretty strong legs with those three things if you just go into the gym and you fucking send it and you just make yourself hurt for an hour and a half each day and then you leave. And that's, you don't need to know anything more than that. Is I'm going to push my legs into these pads until I can't, and then I'm done. And I think that's buy-in before anything else matters. If you can't train to a meaningful intensity that is going to approach failure and approach not just technical failure, because people are really good at fucking shit up really early on. Like a lot of people suck at a lot of things, but if you can,
That was
hey
very
Marshall,
true.
put that one. A lot of people suck at a lot of things. But if we can get to a point where we're not reaching technical failure because we understand the movements well enough that we can actually reach muscular failure, then you're going to see results. If you can contract a muscle until that muscle says, nope, we're done. That's where you need to start before any sort of bias or optimization or exercise selection or variance starts to matter.
Yeah, and I think that if we just take this concept, because what we were talking about is also is just how does your training goal can affect your training split and all these different ideas. But at the end of the day, if you're grasping what we just said, it kind of doesn't matter that much. Like, especially for hypertrophy focused things, like there's obviously things that you can set up in a way where it will be more convenient and you can kind of like even like we talk about phase potentiation, you can kind of like potentiate your own session or like your week in a certain way if you're a little smart about it. But I think that it's so easy right now to get caught up on the, oh, this is the perfect split for X and Y, or this is like if you don't do this split, that's why your legs aren't growing. Like that
Yeah.
is so irrelevant in the hierarchy of things that matter that you could almost pick any split and make it work if you wanted to.
Yeah.
I mean, is there better ways to do it? Probably, but at the core is what we just said. Can you kind of train hard? And I mean, the other stuff is what you just said. Like we're assuming there's a base level of competency here where you're not going to just look like a complete idiot with a hamstring curl.
Mm-hmm.
But if that is an assumption that we can make, which I think it is, then that's kind of what matters.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Um, I guess my question for you then, and this is you personally, what does your training split look like right now? And over the years, what different training splits have you tried? And what were the benefits and the negatives of those splits?
I have done probably all of the splits at one point. Anything from push pull legs, the old like classic Arnold split, 2-a-day sessions, upper lower, some full body training. So I feel like I've done all of the splits. Currently, it's essentially kind of like a push pull legs, and then again a push pull, and that's one micro, and then I kind of repeat. So even though lower body is kind of my main focus at the moment, my volume there and my frequency is limited. And the idea at the moment is just I have one session to kind of kill myself in that, and then I just recover for the rest of the week.
Yeah.
And we'll see how that evolves. But that's kind of the approach at the moment. Like there's not a lot of frequency. The volume is not even that high, but it's like some heavy hinging, some prone ham curl, some Bulgarians, bilaterally loaded, and some leg extensions. And I just have to try and annihilate myself with like 4 exercises a week. And that's currently the goal. And when it comes to push and pull, there's some variations in there and kind of keeping in check that I can maintain some level of ER in the shoulder and all that stuff. But in reality, I think like if I look at the program, that would be the major difference from like a common approach, where I like the volume towards the body part that I want to grow the most in the next, I don't know, 2 years is the lowest. But the intensity is pretty high. Like I come out of these sessions and I could probably not do another lower body session within the next good couple of days.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the current approach. I don't know if you wanted to hop on before I did something different.
Yeah, for sure. And I just have one question with that too is so if lower is the emphasis right now, how many exercises are in your lower session?
I think that's probably about them. One, two, three. I think it's 4 or 5, but
Yeah.
that's where it's capped. And I have like I throw in some like 45-degree hip extension before I start. I have some like it's just like some body weight lunges, some adductor machine. But like I'm not trying to kill myself on those. I'm just kind of like going through the movement, feeling good, and then once I get to prone hamstring curl, I go hard, and then hinging. Like by exercise 2, I'm usually destroyed,
Yeah.
and then I just have to do some Bulgarians and some extra stuff.
I love it. Yeah, and that's you kind of proved a point for me that I wanted to prove. But I'll talk about my split and then I'll get to that. But right now, my goal is lower body hypertrophy in the interest of increasing my squat strength.
Yeah.
So with that, my split is legs, push, pull, rest, legs. So I have 4 training days within a week. I'll rest, I'll do legs, push, pull, rest, legs, and I'll have 2 rest days before my next lower session.
Okay.
And that is intentional, and it's very much like you said. My first leg day of the week is a lower stimulus, and that is more of a kind of hinge based session.
Can you just let me know what you mean by lower stimulus?
Yeah, so lower stimulus, I have it's going to be lower loadability, higher recoverability
Oh,
is the way that I
gotcha.
think of
Yeah.
it. So I'll choose variations where I can get a lot out of less load. So
Yeah.
that's a day where I will do B stance RDLs, but I'll do them with the biggest dumbbells we have in the gym. Sorry, dumbbell. I'll go contralaterally loaded. I have up to 150s in my gym. So I'll do probably 2, maybe 3 working sets of like 10 to 15 reps, depending on how I'm feeling, with a single 150. So if we're talking about like RDLs, like you and I, what do we rip in Tampa? We rip 455 for a couple reps.
Yes,
Like
sir.
that's going to hurt. You're going to feel that for a couple days. Like even if it's not muscle soreness, it's central nervous system fatigue. Like
Yeah.
that's going to take a few days to fully recover from. The 150, like, yes, I'm going to get a little bit more local fatigue, a little bit more core fatigue, but it's going to be a lot easier to recover from a 150-pound dumbbell than a 455-pound barbell.
Yeah.
So I'll push that. I'll do, I'm doing that split squat variation twice a week. So bilaterally loaded. I won't do rest pause on my Monday. So I'll do probably, like 10 to 15 reps for 3 working sets. Um, and then from there, I'll do a leg press and a quad extension. So, and leg press is pretty moderate. It's not like I'm killing myself on the leg press. So that's something that I'm sorry. Actually, I recently switched out leg press for seated hamstring curls, so it is much lower stimulus,
Yeah.
and then quad extension. So it's very lower body focused, but I have like 4 exercises that I'm taking reasonable proximity to failure, and then I'll have from Monday until Friday to recover before I have another lower body session. And then on Friday, that's my squat day. I'll call it my higher stimulus day. So more fatiguing, more loadability. It's going to require more recoverability from that. And I'll be honest, lately I've been getting through 3 exercises on my high stimulus squat day. Like I'll do a B stance RDL and a 45-degree hip extension, but I'll probably limit the load to about 80 pounds on the B stance
Yeah.
RDL as more of a movement primer. I won't even load the 45-degree hip extension, and then I'll back squat. Um, Last week, I've been doing progressive reps as my overload for back squat. So I've been working up over the past few weeks. I did sets of 2 with 200 kilos, did a set of 3, a top set of 3, and then last week I did a top set of 4 with a drop set at 180. And then I'll do the split squats, rest, pause, and I'll just want to fucking vomit. I'll do 3 working sets. By the time I'm done with the second, like I'm legitimately sick. I'm nauseous. And then I'll somehow get through a third, and then I'll just send it on a quad extension. I'll leave. And that's like, keep in mind, I've had significant growth in my quads doing this, and this is very low volume. Like that's 7 exercises a week that I'm doing for
Yeah.
my legs, and like 2 working sets in squat, probably 3 working sets on the rest of those exercises. So it's relatively low volume. I'm able to take it pretty close to failure on all of these exercises. And the thing that's kind of outside of the bubble here is food. I'm
Yeah.
eating. I'm at like almost 4,300 calories right now. So it's like that's the big thing is I'm giving myself the space and the stimulus to recover in between these sessions,
Yeah.
because I'll hit a heavy session on Friday and I'll be fucking wrecked. Like I won't want to get off the couch on Saturday. So like all weekend I'm just trying to recover so that I can hit a moderate session again on Monday with my lower body. So my training split, it's very minimal, like 4 training days. Um, each of these days, like my lower sessions, I'm at the gym probably 2 hours max. My upper sessions, it's probably an hour and a half, and that's like it's uh like pull and biceps. Was it like back and bis, and then I'll do like chest and tris, and that's my training split. And I've seen like pretty good growth. I've put on a lot of weight. The majority of it's like clean weights, like muscle mass, and the thing is that I'm able to drive enough stimulus through my 4 working sets of each of these muscle groups on a given day, that I'm then giving myself the room and giving myself the space to recover. And the recovery is what's driving the progress, not necessarily the sessions.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest piece. And like talking to you within the last year or so, I know your training style changed a little bit from what it used to be, but that seems to be the major difference. Like you just take the recovery portion of it a lot more serious, and not as like a if it happens, it happens, but more so like the same way that we approach training, right? That it's going to happen, and then you just kind of go for it, and if you can kind of optimize for that. That's in reality, like, can you line up your actions with what you're really trying to achieve? But yeah, I think the main takeaway from all this is that you don't actually need that much volume if you really, really train hard. And not even you don't need that much volume, you can't even train that much volume. Like, even if you wanted to, this is what surprises me about when we're hanging out, because last time was what, like almost 2.5 weeks where it was like almost every day of this. Usually, like if I have one of the days that we have in Tampa at home, I'm not going to do anything for the next 2 days. But there was like, all right, let's do it back to back to back to back for like 2.5 weeks. And
Brutal.
then it's just for fun. But, and you know, this is just like came into my mind from when we were in Tampa about what we said earlier about sometimes you just need to nudge it in the right direction and the load will do the rest. So like touching back on that topic. At my current gym, dumbbells cap out at 100. That's
Ooh,
not a lot.
no wonder you're looking so skinny.
Oh my goodness. So like if I ever have like a contralateral dumbbell row, it's nothing. Like we're trying to drive a stimulus of anti-rotation, but I don't feel it. Like I have to go like, I don't know, 15-second reps for me to feel any sort of anti-rotation stimulus. Even when I go for like 120s at some gym or whatever. When we did, in a maybe not so smart manner, 200-pound rows, dude, I felt my obliques coming off the bone. Like I felt the anti-rotation. So that's just like, was it the smartest thing? Probably not. But it's an example of if you can, the weight will really show you not just the results, but like in this case, like, oh, this is a stimulus that you want to drive. Just bump the weight, and you'll actually feel the thing that you're supposed to feel.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And it's funny. I had this conversation with Corey the other day about like how do you know that you're in your working sets, right? And I
Mm,
think that's something that people like, they just kind of are mindless about training, or they don't want to be uncomfortable. but a working set is something that necessitates recovery, right?
Yeah.
A working set is something that if I do this weight for the prescribed amount of reps and I do it in a reasonably technically proficient way, I'm going to need a period of rest before I can recreate that effort. So
Yeah.
if you're just like buzzing through and you're like doing your dumbbell rows at like 80 and then you grab the 100 and you're like, all right, I'll go again. And then you sit down, like scroll the internet, you're like, all right, I'll go again. It's like, no. You need a weight that's going to necessitate you stopping. You're like, all right, I think I can go again now. If you don't have that moment after your set, then it's not a working set. Like you're still in warm up range. You're not taking that set as far as you need to. And like if loading isn't the goal, then you can do that with tempo. Like tempo hurts. Throw in like a 2-second eccentric, 2-second concentric on your reps, and it's going to make that 100-pound dumbbell feel at least like a 120. Like if you slow it down and you really hold muscle tension and you maintain positioning, that's going to be something that you're going to have to try really fucking hard, and it's going to necessitate rest in between. And that's actually a better way for most people to do it, because a lighter weight, you'll be able to hold better positioning for longer. And if you're holding better positioning, you're actually directing that tension to the muscle groups or the muscle fibers that it's intended to be in. As opposed to if you just chase load, you're going to start having compensations at some point and things are going to start breaking down.
Yeah, dude, my current RDLs, the tempo is 3 seconds on the way down, 2 seconds on the bottom. And it just makes me want to shoot myself. Like I would much rather do twice a reps if I could just get in and out from a how I feel perspective.
Yeah.
But I mean, in a way, it's a form of load management. It's a form of, I mean, deriving the stimulus from a different source, and it allows me to do other things in my session. Like maybe if I was just to drive load, I would not be able to do other parts of the training session. And for sure, I know that I would be falling into these compensations. And like if I was just chasing, like, the only way I improve this set is by adding a 25, I would probably not have a back at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's another example of that is exercise order too. When I was earlier on in that progression I mentioned with the split squats, when I was doing contralateral and I was getting up there and load, something that I added in to get greater stimulus out of less load or in the absence of progressing load was I just put my quad extensions before my split squats.
Yeah.
So I would just smash my quads on the quad extension, and then I'd go do my contralaterally loaded split squats, and I would get a greater stimulus because there's already a baseline level of fatigue, so that I wouldn't necessarily be chasing loading because I'm already fatigued, but I'd still be getting a meaningful stimulus and a meaningful proximity to failure with either the same or even less load in certain instances.
Yeah, I remember when I told Mac that my contralateral rows were doing nothing for me, he just moved them towards the end of the session, and I had essentially 11-second reps. And then that was enough to, that was terrible. But that was enough to make me feel something during the set.
And that's really all we want. We just want to feel something.
Yeah.
Unreal, man. Well, I think we can cap it there. I appreciate you for being here today. Always a pleasure having you on the show. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, I want you to go into the comments and let us know who you think looks bigger right now. I know it's going to be me. Give Jorge a shot. I mean, how tall are you? 6 foot, 6'2"?
6, yeah.
6 foot? All right, he's 6 foot, 165 pounds. This guy's trying
Shut
really
up.
hard.
Dude, I told you, if I ever get close to your weight, you have permission for some assisted ending of my life.
Yeah, I'll murder you out of love.
It's a mercy kill at that point. Yeah.
No, I won't be able to associate with you anymore. But I'm gonna do everything I can to weigh more than you. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in. Jorge on Instagram is just Jorge de Hoyos.
Jorge de Hoyos _ just it'll pop up.
Yeah. Make sure you're following Jorge, especially if you are Spanish speaking, or probably bilingual if you're listening to this podcast, the best Spanish speaking content on the internet, Jorge de Hoyos. He'll be in the level 1. Catch him in the labs. Appreciate you guys for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Jorge, anything to sign off on?
Not much right now. Hop on the L1, hop on the L2 if you already took the L1, and we'll see you in a lecture.
Cool. Thanks, guys.